Camera pans slowly through a dense, foggy forest, revealing a rusted BMW R18 buried under damp leaves and vines.
Close-up of the corroded BMW engine badge, partially obscured by moss. A man's hand brushes away dry leaves from the gas tank, revealing pitted chrome. A heavy-duty tow truck backs into the forest clearing, its hydraulic bed lowering.
The mechanic secures rusty chains around the BMW R18's frame.
The winch pulls the bike onto the flatbed with a loud, metallic grinding sound. The tow truck arrives at a high-end, industrial-style garage with warm Edison lighting. The rusted motorcycle is rolled onto a hydraulic lift in the center of the garage. Extreme close-up of the mechanic's eyes as he inspects the engine cylinders. The mechanic sprays a heavy coat of WD-40 on a seized bolt, removing the moldy, rotting leather seat with a sharp tug.
Using a socket wrench to loosen the exhaust nuts with a satisfying click.
Dropping a rusted bolt into a magnetic steel tray. Lifting the heavy fuel tank off the frame, showing the rusted underside. Draining thick, jet black oil from the engine into a pan. Removing the front wheel, the rusted spokes catching the garage light.
Cutting through a tangled, corroded wiring harness with wire cutters.
Using a floor jack to support the massive boxer engine as it's unbolted. The empty frame stands alone on the lift, looking skeletal and fragile.
Using an impact gun to remove the rear swing arm bolts.
Stripping the engine cylinder heads off to reveal carbon buildup. The mechanic organizes hundreds of small parts on a wooden workbench.
Using a sandblaster to strip the black paint off the frame in a spray of grit.
The frame now sits as bare, shiny steel under the garage spotlights.
High-pressure water jet cleaning the engine block. Steam rising.
The mechanic dips small brass fittings into an ultrasonic cleaner.
Polishing a copper pipe to a high mirror shine on a buffing wheel.
Applying a chemical rust converter to the wheel rims.
Hand sanding the curves of the fuel tank with fine grit sandpaper.
Using a torch to heat a stuck bearing until it glows cherry red.
Tapping the bearing out with a brass hammer and a punch.
Wiping down the engine heads with a degreasing solvent.
Inspecting the piston rings with a magnifying glass.
Applying a layer of green masking tape to the engine before painting. Mixing a custom aged bronze paint in a glass jar. Spray painting the frame with a matte black base coat.
Hand brushing gold leaf onto the recessed letters of the engine block.
wide shot of all cleaned parts laid out perfectly on the floor. Designing a custom brass gear system on a blueprint paper.
Cutting a custom copper fender using a plasma cutter.
Installing an analog pressure gauge with a brass housing onto the handlebars.
Bending a copper pipe to create a custom fuel line.
Welding a brass bracket to the frame with a bright blue flash.
Polishing the massive boxer engine covers with a high-gloss paste.
Engraving a Victorian-style pattern onto the brass gas cap.
Applying a patina wash to the brass parts to give them an aged look.
Mounting a large, retro brass headlight with a yellow-tinted lens. Replacing standard bolts with custom brass acorn nuts.
Fitting a custom-made leather pouch to the side of the frame.
Installing a custom copper fishtail exhaust tip.
Wrapping the exhaust pipes in high-heat brown ceramic tape.
Close-up of the mechanic's greasy hands assembling the clutch mechanism. Tightening the cylinder head bolts with a digital torque wrench. The bike is now 80% complete, showing a mix of black, copper, and brass.
Hoisting the restored engine back into the matte black frame. Connecting the main wiring harness with waterproof connectors.
Sliding the rear axle through the polished wheel hub.
Attaching the custom copper fuel tank with chrome bolts. Installing the custom leather-wrapped handlebars.
Filling the brake master cylinder with fresh, clear fluid. Bleeding the brakes, watching air bubbles disappear through a tube.
Adding high-octane gasoline into the newly painted tank. Pouring premium synthetic oil into the engine crankcase.
Installing the final piece, a brass BMW emblem on the tank side.
Checking the tire pressure with a vintage brass-faced gauge.
Wiping down the entire bike with a final spray of polish and a soft cloth.
The mechanic steps back, wiping sweat from his forehead with a rag.
Close-up of the key being inserted into the brass-trimmed ignition. The mechanic's thumb hovers over the starter button.
The engine cranks for a second, then roars into a deep, rhythmic idle.
Slow cinematic pan from the front wheel to the taillight, showing the complete steampunk build. The mechanic puts on a leather helmet and brass goggles.
The garage door opens, letting in bright, golden hour sunlight.
The BMW R18 speeds down a winding road, its brass parts shimmering in the sun.